The Architecture of Agreement: Why We Surrender to the Crowd. A psychological analysis of conformity, authority, and the struggle for independent thought. In the American cultural mythos, we prize the rugged individualist. We celebrate the pioneer, the outlier, the innovator who thinks different. Yet beneath this veneer of independence lies a fundamental biological truth. Human beings are profoundly social animals wired for connection. This wiring, while essential for our survival as a species, comes with a side effect that psychologists have studied for decades: conformity. Conformity is the act of matching attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors to group norms. It is the invisible current that guides us to stand facing the doors in an elevator, to lower our voices in a library, or to adopt the political opinions of our immediate social circle. While often benign, this mechanism can twist into something darker, suppressing truth and silencing dissent. This analysis explores the psychological underpinnings of why we follow the lead, dissects the landmark experiments of Solomon Asch and Stanley Milgram, and offers a roadmap for reclaiming independent thinking in an era of overwhelming social pressure. Part 1. The Evolutionary Roots of Fitting In. To understand why it is so difficult to stand alone, we must look at our evolutionary history. For our ancestors on the Pleistocene savanna, isolation was a death sentence. To be cast out of the tribe meant facing predators and starvation alone. Therefore, the human brain evolved to interpret social rejection not just as an emotional stinging, but as a survival threat. Neuroscience supports this. When a person deviates from the group opinion, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, lights up. Conversely, when we agree with the group, our brains release dopamine, the pleasure neurotransmitter. We are biologically incentivized to agree. Psychologists generally categorize social influence into two distinct types. Normative social influence. This occurs when we conform to be liked or accepted by the group. We may privately disagree, but we publicly go along to avoid the discomfort of standing out. This is the peer pressure mechanism. Informational social influence. This occurs when we conform because we believe the group has accurate information that we lack. In ambiguous situations, like a crisis or a complex political event, we look to others to define reality. We assume that 50 million people can't be wrong. Part 2. The Asch Conformity Experiments, 1951. The Distortion of Judgment. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch devised a deceptively simple test to measure the power of normative social influence. The setup was straightforward. A participant entered a room with several other people who were actually confederates or actors working for the researcher. They were shown a line on a card and asked to match it to one of the three comparison lines on a second card. The answer was obvious, unambiguously so. In the control group, where participants answered alone, the error rate was less than 1%, but in the experimental condition, the actors were instructed to confidently give the wrong answer before the actual participant had a chance to speak. The results. The findings shocked the psychological community. 75% of participants conformed to the group's wrong answer at least once. Overall, participants conformed on 37% of the critical trials. When asked why they agreed with an obviously wrong answer, participants fell into two camps. Some experienced a distortion of perception, actually starting to believe the group was right, but the majority experienced a distortion of judgment. They knew the group was wrong, but feared the ridicule or awkwardness of being the lone dissenter. The magic number and unanimity. Asch's follow-up studies revealed critical nuances about social pressure. Group size. Conformity increased as the group size grew to 3 or 4 people. Interestingly, adding more people beyond 4 did not significantly increase conformity. It takes only a small tribe to trigger our fear of exclusion. The power of an ally. The most hopeful finding was the true partner variation. If just one other person in the room gave the correct answer, conformity levels dropped by nearly 80%. This suggests that we don't need a majority to stand up for the truth. We just need to know we're not entirely alone. Part 3. The Milgram Experiment, 1961. Obedience and the Agentic State. While Osh studied peer pressure, Yale psychologist Stanley Milgram wanted to understand a darker question. Could the Holocaust happen in the United States? Was the "I was just following orders" defense a unique cultural phenomenon or a universal human trait? Milgram's experiment tested obedience to authority. Participants were assigned the role of teacher and told to administer electric shocks to a learner, an actor in another room, every time they answered a memory question incorrectly. The shocks ranged from 15 volts to a lethal 450 volts. As the shocks increased, the learner would scream, bang on the wall, and eventually go silent. When the teacher hesitated, an experimenter in a gray lab coat would firmly state, "The experiment requires that you continue." The results. Prior to the study, psychologists predicted that less than 1% of the population, only the sadistic or sociopathic, would go to the full 450 volts. The reality? 65% of participants administered the full, potentially lethal shock.
The psychology of the agentic shift. Milgram argued that in hierarchical situations, humans undergo an agentic shift. We move from an autonomous state, where we see ourselves as responsible for our actions, to an agentic state, where we see ourselves as mere instruments of an authority figure. In this state, we feel responsible to the authority. Am I doing a good job following orders? But not responsible for the outcome, the victim's pain. This experiment highlights that conformity isn't just about blending in with peers, it is also about the deep-seated socialization to defer to status, titles, and perceived legitimacy. Part 4. Social Pressure in the Digital Age. The New Skinner Box. Applying the lessons of Ash and Milgram to the 21st century United States reveals a landscape where social pressure has been weaponized and automated. The internet has removed the physical constraints of the tribe, creating a hyper-conformity environment. The echo chamber and group polarization. Social media algorithms are designed to maximize engagement, which often means feeding us content that reinforces our existing beliefs. When we are only exposed to people who agree with us, a phenomenon called group polarization occurs. The group's average opinion becomes more extreme than the initial opinions of its members. If you enter a group slightly leaning left or right, the social dynamic will push you to become radically left or right to signal your loyalty to the tribe. The spiral of silence. Proposed by Elizabeth Noel Neumann, this theory suggests that people are less likely to express an opinion if they believe they are in the minority for fear of isolation, the Ash effect. On social media, where a ratio or a cancel campaign can destroy a reputation in hours, the perceived cost of dissent is astronomically high. This creates a false consensus. Because the dissenters are silent, the majority opinion looks unanimous, even if it isn't. Informational cascade. This is the digital version of informational social influence. When we see a post with 100,000 likes, our brains use a heuristic, social proof. We assume the content must be true or valuable because others have validated it. We bypass our critical faculties and conform to the metric. Part 5. The psychology of independence. Why some resist. Not everyone surrendered in the Ash or Milgram experiments. About 25% of Ash's subjects never conformed. 35% of Milgram subjects refused to continue. What distinguishes these individuals? Research suggests that resistors often possess high self-monitoring. They are aware of social cues but value internal consistency over external validation. Moral autonomy. They view rules as social contracts that can be broken if they violate higher ethical principles, post-conventional morality. Prior commitment. If a person states their opinion publicly before hearing the group, they are far less likely to conform. Writing down one's beliefs acts as an anchor against the tide of influence. Part 6. How to maintain independent thinking. A practical toolkit. Living in a society requires some degree of conformity. We need to drive on the right side of the road and pay taxes. However, Intellectual conformity is dangerous to a free society and individual growth. Here is a psychological framework for maintaining sovereignty over your own mind. 1. Cultivate idiosyncratic credits. Psychologist Edwin Hollander proposed the concept of idiosyncratic credits. These are points you earn with a group by being competent in conforming to minor norms. Once you have enough credits, the group is more likely to tolerate your dissent on major issues. You don't have to be a rebel on everything. Pick your battles so that when you do speak up, you are heard rather than dismissed as a chronic contrarian. 2. The devil's advocate heuristic. In any group setting where consensus is forming too quickly, assign yourself or someone else the role of the devil's advocate. By institutionalizing dissent, you remove the social stigma of disagreement. It transforms the act of questioning from being difficult to doing your job. 3. Pause the agentic shift. When you feel pressure to act because a boss, a politician, or an influencer told you to, trigger a mindfulness gap. Ask yourself, if I were the only person on Earth, would I still view this action as moral? Recoupling your actions with your personal responsibility breaks the trance of obedience. 4. Seek out the other. Confirmation bias is the enemy of independence. Actively consume media and arguments from the opposing tribe, not to mock them, but to understand the logic. As John Stuart Mill argued, he who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. You cannot be an independent thinker if you do not know the full spectrum of thought. 5. Be the ally. Remember the most powerful finding from Ash: it only takes one voice to break the spell of the majority. If you see someone else hesitant to agree with a group consensus that feels wrong, speak up. Your voice may not turn the tide, but it will liberate the person who is struggling to maintain their own perception of reality. Conclusion. The experiments of Ash and Milgram serve as a mirror, reflecting a somewhat uncomfortable truth about human nature. We are pliable, fearful of isolation, and prone to deferring to power. However, biology is not destiny. Conformity is the default setting of the human brain, designed for a time when survival depended on the tribe. But in the modern world, progress, justice, and innovation depend on the outlier, the person who refuses to shock the learner, the person who points to the line and says, "That one is clearly shorter." Maintaining independent thinking is not about rejecting all social norms or becoming a hermit. It is about developing the psychological fortitude to pause, to question, and to ensure that when you say yes, it is because you truly agree, not because you are afraid to say no. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. C.G. Jung.